The phrase is everywhere. On the covers of magazines aimed at women over 50, in the lifestyle sections of newspapers, in the wellness industry that has built an entire economy around the concept, in the compliments paid to senior celebrities who have somehow managed to look a decade younger than they are, in the advertising that sells the creams, the supplements, the procedures, the careful daily regimens designed to ensure that the evidence of aging is kept, as much as possible, from showing on the surface. Age gracefully. It is the aspiration handed to every senior by a culture that means, by it, something almost entirely visual. Maintain the appearance. Keep the skin smooth and the posture upright and the weight managed and the mind sharp. Do not let the years show more than they have to. Fight the visible evidence of time with every tool available and accept, graciously, only what cannot be concealed or corrected. That is what the culture means by aging gracefully, and it is almost entirely wrong. Not because appearance does not matter, or because the care of the body is not a legitimate stewardship, but because the cultural definition of aging gracefully is built on the wrong understanding of what grace is. The culture has borrowed a theological word, grace, and repurposed it as an aesthetic standard. And in doing so, it has taken the most extraordinary concept available to the human spirit and reduced it to a complexion. Grace, in its actual meaning, has nothing to do with how you look. It has to do with what you carry and what you release, how you move through difficulty, what you do with loss, who you become in the seasons that the world calls decline. Whether the years of walking with God have produced in you the specific, visible, genuinely beautiful qualities that no cosmetic procedure can generate and no aging process can remove. Today, I want to give you the biblical definition of aging gracefully, the real one, the one that has been available to senior believers since long before the wellness industry discovered the phrase, the one that produces something the culture's version cannot, a beauty that deepens with the years rather than fighting them, a grace that is not diminished by a single gray hair or a single additional line on the face. Because the senior who is aging gracefully, in the genuine theological, God-designed sense, is one of the most beautiful things in the created order. And most of them have never been told that. What grace actually is, and why it matters for this conversation. Before we can talk about what aging gracefully actually looks like, we have to establish what grace actually is. Because the word has been used so loosely in so many contexts that its theological precision has been blurred to the point where most people have a vague sense of it without a clear grasp of it. In its theological foundation, grace is the unearned, undeserved, freely given favor of God toward people who have no claim on it. It is the goodness of God extended to the undeserving, the gift given to the person who cannot purchase it, the love offered to the one who has nothing to offer in return. Ephesians 2:8-9. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. That is grace at its foundation. But grace, in the life of a person who has been living inside it for decades, produces something secondary. It produces a quality of character, a way of being in the world, a specific, recognizable, genuinely beautiful posture toward life and loss, and other people and God that is the natural consequence of having been, for years, for decades, the recipient of what was not earned. The person who genuinely understands that everything they have is gift does not grasp for what they were not given. The person who has received mercy does not withhold it. The person who has been forgiven extravagantly forgives. The person who has been carried through losses they could not carry alone moves through new losses with a specific quality of steadiness, not because the losses are easier, but because the carrying is trusted. This is what aging gracefully actually means, not the management of the visible evidence of years. The visible expression in the way you move through difficulty, the way you treat people, the way you hold loss, the way you inhabit the present moment, of what decades of God's grace have been building in you from the inside out. What aging gracefully actually looks like. 5 genuine marks. The first mark. It looks like holding loss without being destroyed by it. The senior who is aging gracefully has endured loss, real loss, the kind that arrives with enough force to permanently reshape a life. The spouse, the health, the independence, the friend, the familiar world. They have not been protected from it. They have been carried through it. And the carrying has produced something that the person who has not been carried cannot replicate. A specific, settled, grief-informed, but not grief-defined quality of being in the world that is one of the most quietly powerful things a human being can display. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 describes it. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Hard-pressed, the loss is real and the pressing is genuine, but not crushed, because the pressing was met by something in the interior that was stronger than the pressure. The grace that has been building for decades produces in the senior believer a specific resilience that is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of foundation. The grief is real, the foundation holds, and the person watching can see that the foundation is holding, which is one of the most powerful testimonies available to the senior who may not know they are giving one. This is aging gracefully, not the performance of composure. The genuine, God-sustained, loss-informed peace of someone who knows, from decades of evidence, that the carrying has never stopped. The second mark. It looks like treating people with increasing, rather than decreasing generosity. The bitterness that the years can produce in a person who has accumulated enough disappointments. The specific, gradually tightening guardedness of someone who has been hurt often enough to have concluded that generosity toward people is consistently unrewarded, is the alternative to aging gracefully. And it is a real alternative. Many seniors end up there, not from malice, from the accumulated evidence of a life that did not always return what was invested. The senior who is aging gracefully moves in the opposite direction. Not naively, they know what people are capable of because they have lived long enough to see it, but generously because they have also lived long enough to know what grace feels like when it is extended to the undeserving. And they have come to understand that the extending is as valuable as the receiving. That the person who gives generosity away is the person who lives most fully in the spirit of the grace they have themselves been given. Luke 6:35. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. The kindness that does not depend on the recipient deserving it. The goodness that is extended without calculating the return. This is the visible expression of grace in a person's daily life. And in a senior who has had every reason to become more guarded and has chosen instead to become more generous, it is one of the most beautiful things in the world. The third mark. It looks like speaking with increasing rather than decreasing wisdom and restraint. One of the specific temptations of the senior years is the temptation to fill every available moment of conversation with the accumulated content of a long life, to share what was learned, to offer the wisdom that was hard-won, to ensure that the younger people in the room receive the benefit of the decades of experience that the senior carries. The temptation is not wrong in its motivation. The wisdom is real, and the younger people do need it. But the senior who dispenses it indiscriminately, who has an observation for every situation and an opinion about every decision and a story for every topic, is not aging gracefully. They are aging loudly, and the loudness, however well-intentioned, tends to close the very ears it is trying to reach. Proverbs 17:27-28. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought-wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. The senior who has developed the discipline of strategic silence, who has learned to choose the moment of wisdom rather than filling every moment with it, is the senior whose voice carries the most weight when it is actually used. The words spoken at the right moment to the right person, in the right form, quietly, humbly, without the performance of having earned the right to speak, is the word that changes things. The word spoken reflexively, continuously, without discrimination, eventually becomes background noise. Age gracefully with the tongue. Speak less and mean more. And let the restraint itself communicate the depth that the constant speaking was actually obscuring. The fourth mark. It looks like remaining genuinely curious and genuinely present. There is a version of aging that contracts, that retreats into the familiar, that stops asking questions because it has accumulated enough answers, that disengages from the present because the present is increasingly unfamiliar and the past is increasingly comfortable, that processes new experiences through the filter of what was rather than receiving them on their own terms. And there is a version of aging that expands, that remains genuinely curious about people, about the grandchild's world, the neighbor's story, the new development in a field that was already known but has continued to move, that stays genuinely present to the moment it is in rather than perpetually inhabiting the moments it has already lived, that asks more questions than it answers, and that finds the asking genuinely interesting rather than performatively humble. Proverbs 25. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. The senior with insight does not dispense what they know. They draw out what others carry. They ask the question that nobody else thought to ask. They are genuinely interested in the answer. And the person who is asked that question by a senior who is genuinely interested in the answer has received one of the gifts that only age and wisdom together can produce, the gift of being fully seen and genuinely known by someone who has lived long enough to know what the seeing and the knowing are worth. This is aging gracefully, the expansion rather than the contraction, the curiosity that outlasts the certainty, the presence that belongs entirely to this moment rather than to the accumulated moments that have already passed. The fifth mark, it looks like dying well and being willing to talk about it. This is the mark that most people omit from conversations about aging gracefully, because the culture cannot handle it, and because even within the church the discomfort with explicit conversation about death is considerable. But the senior who is aging gracefully has made a specific peace with the reality of their own mortality. Not a performed peace, not the cheerful dismissal of the subject with a phrase about heaven. A genuine, examined, God-grounded peace with the fact that they are in the final chapter of a mortal life, that the body they inhabit is on a known trajectory, that the years ahead are genuinely finite, and that every one of those finite years is genuinely precious in a way that the illusion of unlimited time cannot produce. And from that peace, from the specific, genuine, well-examined acceptance of what is coming, the senior who is aging gracefully is able to do something extraordinary. They are able to talk about it, to sit with a younger person who is terrified of death, and to model, without performance, what it looks like to face the ending of a mortal life with faith rather than dread, to prepare the people they love, not by avoiding the subject, but by inhabiting it honestly, for the reality that they will all eventually face. Psalm 116:15. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants. Precious. The ending of a faithful life is not a tragedy in God's sight. It is the completion of something he has been invested in since the beginning. And the senior who knows this, who has integrated it into the daily fabric of how they live, rather than relegating it to the emergency thinking reserved for final days, is the senior who is aging most gracefully of all. Because they are not running from the finish line, they are running toward it. And the running, deliberate, faithful, grace-sustained, all the way to the end, is one of the most beautiful things that the human life is capable of producing. Let me close with the honest comparison. The culture's version of aging gracefully costs money. It requires products, procedures, regimens, and the sustained investment of time and resources in the management of what the body is doing on its own timeline, regardless. And what it produces, however skilled the management, is a temporary, surface level, always losing battle against the visible evidence of a process that cannot ultimately be defeated. God's version of aging gracefully costs something different. It costs the surrender of the need to perform, the willingness to be exactly the season you are in, rather than the season the culture wishes you were still in. The daily, practiced, grace-sustained choice to treat people generously, to speak wisely, to remain curious, to hold loss without being destroyed, and to face the finish line with the specific, genuine, earned peace of someone who knows who is waiting there. And what it produces, unlike the culture's version, does not diminish with the years, it deepens with them. 2 Corinthians 4:16 gives the most direct description of this deepening. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Outwardly wasting away. The body is doing what bodies do. This is not denied, not managed. Acknowledged, honestly, without pretense. Inwardly being renewed day by day. While the outside follows its known trajectory, something on the inside is moving in the opposite direction, getting fuller rather than emptier, deeper rather than shallower, more genuinely beautiful, in the way that only genuinely beautiful things become, not in spite of the years, but through them. That is aging gracefully. That is what God designed the senior years to produce in the person who walks through them with Him, and no cream in the world can replicate it. Of the 5 marks of genuine aging gracefully in this message, which one is most present in your life right now, and which one is most absent? The one that is most absent is the invitation, the specific area where God's grace is still doing its deepest work in you, still producing what the years and the carrying and the faithfulness have been building toward. Lean into it, not as a self-improvement project, as the willing cooperation with what God is already doing in the interior while the exterior follows its own known path. Share this message with every senior you know who has been measuring themselves against the culture's definition, who has been quietly feeling like they are losing a battle they were never designed to win against the visible evidence of time. This message gives them a different measuring stick, the right one. Comment below, "I am aging gracefully from the inside out." Declare it as the governing definition over every year still ahead. And subscribe, because this channel consistently offers the counter-narrative that the culture cannot give and that the senior believer desperately needs. The one that says the years are not the enemy. They are the material God is using to build the most beautiful version of you yet. Proverbs 16:31, one final time, as the declaration that every senior believer should wake up to and go to sleep with and carry through every day of the years still ahead. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness. A crown, not a problem, not an inconvenience, not the visible evidence of a battle being lost against the inevitable. A crown, attained through the long, faithful, grace-walked road of a life lived toward God, through the losses that were held without being destroyed, through the generosity extended when guardedness would have been easier, through the words held back and the wisdom offered at the right moment, through the curiosity that outlasted the certainty and the presence that remained fully in this moment, through the peace made with the finish line while the race was still being run. That is what the gray hair means, not what the culture says it means. What God says it means, wear it as the crown it is.